It's been a very long time now since we looked at our leeks last, and they are now looking brilliant and ready to get potted out. So these are the ones that we potted up last time, and these were to make sure that we had some larger leeks. This is the Bulgarian giant variety. This is the same variety, but ones that we didn't pot up. So they are obviously in a different area than they were in the tray when you last saw them. And that's just because I've divided them into these little soil blocks, which is how I sell them to some of the locals. So they haven't had anything else happen to them except for they've been popped into here. And you can see they are considerably smaller than those other ones that we did pot on, but they should be absolutely fine. I'd say they are struggling more with the peat-free compost over the last few years and don't do as well. So if you are wanting larger leeks, then potting them on is a much better way of doing it than leaving them in the compost. And you probably want to feed them more consistently than I have in reality. Those were sown back in February, I think it was, and then we also did a later sowing, and these are the winter leeks. So this is a giant winter variety, and they are also looking about similar sort of size really as the Bulgarian giants, but they're ready to go in. Or you could at this point instead pot these on into a larger pot and then put them out when they're larger. So it really depends whether or not you have an area ready for them and available on your plot. We've now harvested the potatoes in the area that these are now going, so we're going to pop them out at this smaller size. For this, we really want something like a dibber or a stick or anything that you can just push into the ground, because we're going to plant them quite deep. This helps to make sure that we have the white stems that we usually find with leeks rather than a lot of the deeper green foliage. We're also going to look at actually planting some together, so multi-planted ones. These usually aren't planted quite as deep, and you wouldn't find that you then have the whiter stems. So that will depend on how you use your leeks and how you like them, of which you would rather do. The spacing that we're going to be using for the individual leeks is around 10 centimetres, and the spacing for the multi-sown or multi-planted leeks is around 20 to 22 centimetres between each of those clumps. With the larger leeks in this tray, one of the things that I am going to do is just take some tops off of them now. So I've got a bucket below, and then I'm just going to cut the tops off, and this should help it start to bulk out as well. You can also do this with the roots as well, and that can help it encourage more growth more quickly too. And I usually see whether or not the roots are going to be a problem when we're trying to get them in the hole, and at that point I can cut them if needs be. Okay, that's them all chopped and ready. We do have problems with allium leaf miner in my area, and if you've had problems with your garlic, for example, then first of all you want to make sure that you do not plant these in a bed where you've previously had alliums planted in. Any other crop except for alliums, so that's your onions, your leeks, your garlic, spring onions, and things like chives as well. But allium leaf miner will live in the ground for a couple of years. So if you have had an issue in that bed, then you really want to be using a bed that hasn't had any alliums in for a few years. And then the next thing that I'll be doing is making sure that we net it. And we want to net it with a very, very fine net that is sold for allium leaf miner. The fly that causes this issue is absolutely tiny, so our usual netting isn't actually going to be strong enough in order to deal with this. We want something that is much finer. This is the bed that we're going to be planting these into today. These have just had our first early potatoes come out of them, and all I've done now is give it a bit of a weed, a bit of a hoe over, and it's had a very, very good water because it was really quite dry. I have also added a little bit of seaweed meal just to replenish the soil a little bit. I've roughly marked out where the bed border is going to go for the supports. So we're just going to squeeze the bottom of the pot, and then that should release them, and hopefully we've got some decent roots on them. So I'm just going to get all of these downs out. It's okay if the compost falls off. That really doesn't matter. If anything, it'll actually make it easier to plant them, to be honest. The first thing I'm going to do is just roughly work out where they're going to be positioned. Okay. Want to have our hose at the ready for this job as well. So all we're going to do is push down as far as we can and make as big as a hole, as deep as you can, and we're going to drop them in. So now that we've popped the leeks in, we don't want to backfill them with soil. The whole point of this is that we are going to avoid having any of the soil actually backing down into the leaf joints then, and therefore making it dirty when we come to eat it. So all we want to do now is fill the holes with water. And you can see that these holes still are not completely filled, and we don't want to fill them even at this stage. They're just going to naturally settle and the leeks will start standing up on their own. So just leave them in the angles that they are, they'll be absolutely fine. And then these are the winter giants that I'm going to put in. So what we want to do for these is break off any soil that we've got and just expose those roots and move them to individual leeks. I don't need to trim these roots. They were trimmed, however, when they were popped into the soil block. So if yours are looking like they are very, very long, then it may be easier at this point to just trim them a little bit to roughly sort of an inch or two. These ones we're going to pop in as a multi-planted set, so I'm going to pop them into fours. Really, you're looking for sort of threes and fours. I wouldn't really go above that. And we're not going to go as deep with these. I'm just going to pop the 4 in, and then I'm going for a spacing of roughly sort of 20 centimetres. It will probably be a little bit closer in order to fit them in the net. We got one too many in that one. So any that are particularly weak, just going to take those ones out and compost them. Just pop those ones in there. And then the last one's over here. Again, I got 4. Pop those in there. Because these aren't quite so deep, you are okay to backfill these a little bit, but not necessarily wanting to do it all the way. Let the water take care of some of that as well. And then I'm just going to give these a good water, exactly the same as the other ones. As these grow, what will happen is they will just sort of twist around each other and push each other apart a little bit. And then they'll be a little bit smaller than the ones that are planted individually, but they still grow really quite well like that. Don't forget to label the different varieties if you have got more than one. That's them all planted, and we've now added a net. And then the next thing that I'm going to be doing with these is actually making sure that they are really well watered in for the next week or maybe 2. We have got quite a lot of hot weather at the moment, so we do want to make sure these roots get really well established and that the plants aren't struggling with that heat initially. After that, I'll be really thinking about watering these only if we don't have any rain, and I'll be looking at watering them usually really well once a week if they need it, or if it's really, really hot weather, then I might need to do that twice a week. We want to keep the beds well weeded as well. They don't particularly like competition, very much like the onions don't. Usually you'll find that these don't really need feeding, but if you do want to supplement them with a feed, then something like a nettle feed would be absolutely fine, or you could add something like chicken manure pellets or anything like that into the ground just as a slow release fertilizer. And then the next time we'll be really looking at these is once they are much more established and getting a lot bigger and maybe even ready to harvest. But if you have got any questions, then please do let me know and we'll have a look at that.